he laughed. Okay, so we'll mark the rest in next week's lesson, inshallah. But if you can carry on with number 10 for homework. Chapter 10 for homework. You didn't finish chapter 9 with homework, but we'll mark the rest for homework as well. I mean, we'll mark the rest next week, but chapter 10 for homework as well. So we have a nikah here at 10 o'clock. So what we'll do is we'll teach until the nikah starts, and then when the nikah starts, we'll have a break. So if the nikah runs late, we'll start late. We'll have a break late. The break's late every week, but it's officially late this week with the nikah. There's an official reason for its lateness of the break. Okay, open your mushafs to Surah Al-A'la. Moral therapeutic deity. Let's remember that. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى. So Allah begins, Allah says, Sabbih, which is the amr of the which verb? Second verb. For how many people? One person. You, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sabbih, you glorify. You declare the perfection, you declare the exaltation of Isma Rabbika, of the name of your Lord, Al-A'la, the most high, the most lofty. Alladhi, the one that khalaqa fasawwa. So there's a very long discussion about what that means. I hope you remember some of the discussion with regard to it last week. Alladhi, the one that khalaqa,
created.
He created. So we mentioned that this is linked to the proofs of Allah Ta'ala. And just to summarize the discussion, one of the proofs of Allah Ta'ala is the idea of contingency. Is that every creation, if you think about it, like this battery was created out of nothing. What was created out of? Something, components, whatever the case is. Then that thing was created out of nothing. No, that thing was created out of nothing. No, let's say we go all the way back. Okay, there's a planet. So the planet created out of nothing. Okay, so it got to the Big Bang. There's a Big Bang created out of nothing. So what happens is that you keep going back because each creation has a contingency on something which precedes it. And then, is it logical that that contingencies never stop? Is it logical that the contingency doesn't stop? In Kalam, that's called tasalsul. Tasalsul means a never-ending chain of contingencies. So in other words, what we believe is that, logically speaking, things can't just keep being created of something else. They must come to an end point. But when you come to the end point, what you don't believe about that first thing. The first thing exists without contingency. Because you must arrive there, because if you don't arrive there, where are you going to arrive? You can't have infinite regression of of contingencies. You can't because logically it doesn't make sense, because how do you know what I mean? You get stuck with that in your mind. So in the end, when you go back, in the end, you must come to a being that is without contingency. Meaning what? That being itself had no creator. That being itself had no predecessor. That being itself didn't have a cause to come into being, and it is the source of the sequence of creation. You can't guess forwards, right? Yeah. No, I'm just joking, because the tautology there. Anyway, Bismillah. No. Even you regress, yes? Yeah. You can have. Why can't you have multiple? How do the multiple things come into existence? I think you can probably argue that maybe all contingencies come to a set of multiple beings that basically somehow themselves have no prior existence. And I think those are sometimes what happens is with the logical, and this was actually the talk of Yasir Padhi, which is interesting. It's an interesting talk, because basically within Islamic history you get the Ash'ari and the Maturidis, which are one school of thought, but that school of thought leans heavily on intellectual arguments, or rational arguments. Many of those foundations of argumentation and logic comes from the Greeks, because the Muslims basically absorbed it, but they didn't obviously refined it and so on. So the arguments themselves will always have limitations. It's just it's a very highly improbable conclusion to come to the fact that the contingencies can lead to, at the same point, a multitude of beings, because the problem is that the multitude of beings, how do they not cause entropy or destruction? Because the multiple basically, how do they create a system which is seamless? And that's a Quranic argument. What's it? Lokana? Who's our Kufad in the class? Ask me online. Yes, that's why I'm mentioning it. So when you have multiple beings, you have a conflict of will, and you have entropy. Entropy means destruction, and then you basically don't have a system. So it'll be the counter argument to that, and therefore you go back to one being logically. Yeah. But obviously, what I'm saying is while we firmly affirm the logical arguments, there will always be some degree of limitation to them, because if there were no limitation to them, then there'll be no one who is disbelieved. You understand? So if you're gonna, for example, this is called you could call this the contingent argument. You could call it the Kalam cosmological argument. Then you're gonna Google counters to it. You know the point. I don't think it's too deep. All I'm saying is that the idea of Allah, when Allah says Alladhi, He is the one that khalaqa. What's the implication there? Is that He is the one that doesn't have makhluk before Him. He's not makhluk Himself. When Allah says He is the one that khalaqa, what it means, I'm taking the argument back and 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 back. Who must I arrive to? Alladhi khalaqa. You with me? So He is the one that all the contingencies rest on. And that's Allah's name, actually, As-Samad. As-Samad means all the contingencies rest upon Him. So He is, and khalaqa is the one that originally creates. That's going to be the original creator. And then we mentioned fasawwa. Fasawwa means what? To balance, to proportion, but also to make things fit for purpose. And what's the word I gave you? You must know these fancy words. What's wrong with you guys? What was the one I gave you last week? Oh. Okay.
Is it Ahla transcendent?
I like it without saying this, but we answer one now. Eh? Does not give him a fancy first one. So it just means a teleological argument. Teleological basically means the argument by design. Meaning what? That the intricacy of the design. So the one argument is what? The fact that the contingencies don't end and therefore it must end by a alladhi khalaqa. Then the second argument is that the world itself is not a primitive creation. It has design in it. It has sophisticated design. A word for sophisticated design can be sawwar. Meaning what? That something is fit for its purpose. And therefore it can allude to a teleological argument. Teleological argument is because there is complex design, there must be a designer. Because this phone, by its nature, it's complex and it's intricate. You can't say this phone just like evolved to this point. There must have been some being that basically designed it. So that's the additional argument of that's a separate argument from the contingency kalam argument, and you can say both of those are alluded to in this one verse. Alladhi khalaqa, he originally created everything, fasawwa, and he proportioned everything for its purpose. For its purpose. Walladhi qaddara fahada, and then after he created, or not after, but after in our human terms, although there's not before and after in Allah's terms, so you must obviously excuse limitation of language. And I said, Allah did this, then he did that. The time is not like really that relevant to Allah. But anyway, Walladhi, and he is the one that qaddara. He then measures out, qadr means to measure out. He measures out everything that is going to happen to this creation. So aside from creating it, aside from making it fit for purpose, he also measures and determines all of it. Fahada, and then he guides it. And we mentioned there, this could refer to either human beings, or refer to people. So we ended there. Walladhi, and we're still on the description of Allah. This is which description number 4. What's first description? Al-A'la. Second description, Alladhi khalaqa fasawwa. Third description, Walladhi qaddara fahada. Fourth description, Walladhi akhraja al-mar'a. Walladhi, and the one that akhraja al-mar'a. What does akhraja mean? Akhraja means to bring forth. It's on the fourth bab. Kharaja means to go out. Akhraja on the fourth bab means to cause to come out, to cause to emerge. Al-mar'a. What's mar'a? Mar'a is generally like is what animals will graze on, like grasses and foliage and pasture. So normally translation will say herbage or pasture, that which animals graze on. Then ja'alahu. Ja'ala means to make, but ja'ala always has what? 2 maf'uls. It means to make something into something, but to transform something into something. Then ja'alahu, he, Allah, makes it. What does it go back to? The mar'a. He makes it, this pasture, mar'a, he makes it ghutha'an. What's ghutha'an? Ghutha'an means what? When something dries out. Ghutha'an means something dries out. Meaning what? After a while that plant will, or that grass will either fall down, it will be, its roots will be devoured or something, it will dry out. When that grass dries out, it becomes what? Ahwa. What's ahwa?
Dark.
Ahwa means dark, but it means like a color that is between like red, brown, until black. Although the coloration will say black, it doesn't always mean pure black. It means like sometimes like a brownish or a dark red, or a dark color basically. Meaning what? That فَجَعَلَهُ, then he makes it غُثَاءً, dried out. أَحْوَى, he makes it dark. Again, you must ask yourself what? So that's the linguistic understanding. Understand the words, what the words mean? وَالَّذِي, the one that أَخْرَجَ, he brings forth, al-mar'a, the herbage, the pasturage. Then جَعَلَهُ, he makes it, the herbage, the pasturage, غُثَاءً, dried out, cut off from life, cut off from water, and then it starts fading and becomes ahwa, it becomes darkened as it starts to decompose and becomes darkened. The question is, why does Allah mention all of these things?
To show the circle of life, perhaps, Mawla.
So one of it is to show that this is the circle of life. Allah spoke on the beginning of life, خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى. There's emanation. قَدَّرَ فَهَدَى. There's decree and there's guidance. And then, وَالَّذِي أَخْرَجَ الْمَرْعَى. Where's the fa'il going back to? Of أخرج. Who is the fa'il of أخرج? And left in. Again, you're saying, in left in, you're saying, وَالَّذِي.
It's the one.
Who is referring to? Allah. He again is attributing the growth of grass and herbage to himself. Are you with me? He is producing what? And akhraj al-mar'a is what's going to be like a literally means to bring grass forth, but it also means like metaphorically what? To give life. To give life, to give continuous creation, to give life. And then Allah says, فَجَعَلَهُ غُثَاءً أَحْوَى. Where is the fa'il for فَجَعَلَهُ? Inside is the He inside, which means to He, Allah, is the one that is causing things to be cut off from life and to fade and to be destroyed. So in the sense, Allah is speaking about the literal phenomenon, Allah is speaking about the metaphorical circle of life. And Allah says, tells Prophet ﷺ, this whole thing about tasbih is linked to سَنُقْرِئُكَ فَلَا تَنْسَى. Because remember, all the previous ayat are simply sifas and ma'tufs of al-a'la, which is all descriptions of Allah. So Allah, in the sense, Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ in the first 5 verses, make tasbih of this God, of this all-empowerful Lord. Make tasbih. And when you make tasbih, what's going to happen? سَنُقْرِئُكَ فَلَا تَنْسَى. Sa, what does sa mean? Soon, nuqri'uka. What's nuqri'u mean? Please employ your understanding of verbs.
Cause to read. We will
Aqra'a yuqri'u. We will make. Say
You recite.
Qara'a naqra'u means we recite. It's not naqra'u, this is nuqri'u. So this is on the 4th verb, which is aqra'a yuqri'u, which is causation, which means make. So here, in other words, nuqri aqra'a means he made recite. Yaqra'u, he is making recite. Nuqri'u, we are making recite. Sanuqri'uka, we will make you, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we will make you recite. The number of meanings, obvious meaning obviously is that the recitation is not obviously image of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something liberty. But one of the concerns of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the preservation of the message. It comes to Qiyamah. لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به إن علينا جمعه وقرآنه. In Surah Qiyamah. Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ, don't worry, we are going to make you recite it. Meaning what? Your hifz is guaranteed. Your preservation is guaranteed. فَلَا تَنْسَى. فَلَا, then not tansa, you will not forget. We will make you recite and you will not forget the recitation. So Allah is in a sense comforting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What do you call the Arabic word for comforting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Tasliya. Good. Someone's listening to Etika. or somewhere else. سَنُقْرِئُكَ فَلَا تَنْسَى. It is also comfort to the Prophet ﷺ that he's not going to forget the message. إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ. إِلَّا, except, ma, that which, sha Allah, that which Allah has willed. Sha'a is in the past. Sha'a, fa'ala, sha'a, except that which Allah has willed. So what does tansa first of all mean? Because the exception comes from tansa. You will not forget. Tansa means that something will be removed. Right? It will be removed. Your forgetting can either be momentarily, you can forget something, or it can be permanent. So what does Allah mean that illa ma sha Allah? Referring to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You will not forget unless Allah wants you to forget. What is the meaning of that? So the one thing is going to be with regard to abrogation. So there's two meanings. In other words, let's do the simple one first. The simple one first is that there is a tansa, a forgetfulness, which is momentarily. You with me? In other words, in a moment you can forget. In a moment you can forget. So there were instances where the Prophet ﷺ in Salah would forget the verse. And then the Sahaba would say, like, was it abrogated? So, no, I just forgot the verse. And they because they weren't sure, like, you know what I mean? In other words, so you were trying to teach them that if the Imam forgets something, you must correct the person. But the way to teach that something is actually to do it. So then if you say, no, if I omitted, you must correct me. So it was actually a lesson, but that's a momentarily tansa, a momentarily forgetting. Then there's the idea of abrogation. And the idea of abrogation is quite a long discussion, because but the quick discussion is that you get two types of abrogation. You get the abrogation of the verse, or you get the abrogation of the law. The abrogation of the verse, or the abrogation of the law or the application. So there are certain ayat in the Quran, not many, but certain ayat in the Quran that maybe it's mentioned there, but the idea is that you don't, the ayah is mentioned, but the law is abrogated. For example, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. Don't come near to salah when you are intoxicated. Does Allah mean we're not walk time you can have a shot or two? It doesn't mean that in the sense that was just part of the gradual implementation of the prohibition of wine. It doesn't mean now that you're not making salah, you have your hayd, you can have 7 days of open bar. It doesn't mean that. You with me? Because the application is no longer there, but the verse is still there. In other words, you can have the verse remaining, and then but you can have the abrogation of the law. In other cases, you can have the verse was there once upon a time, the verse was removed, and then but the law still remains. What's the most famous example when they always speak about it? Which verse they speak about normally? Eh? Now I'm saying which verse they normally speak about that was part of the Quran but was removed. Eh? The most famous verse you'll find in the usul books is always going to be this verse here: "Ash-shaykhu wa shaykhatu idha zanaya farjimuhuma." Shaykha wa you know that. You guys read usul books, that's the problem, man. You read usul al-fiqh, you don't read ulum al-Quran, you don't read, what you guys reading? You're reading WhatsApp. You're kiss other Yusuf. No. So I want to separate first of all between Kalamullah and Quran. Is Quran all of Kalamullah or part of Kalamullah? The Mus'haf, the verse in the Mus'haf, is all of Kalamullah or part of Kalamullah? It's part of Kalamullah. Obviously, the original Torah, original Injil is part of Kalamullah. All part of Kalamullah. So Kalamullah is the speech of Allah without transmitted. Allah then decrees for a certain set of his speech to be included in a final revelation, which is the Mus'haf. And it decreases to be in certain verse order. The surah order is ikhtilafan, but in verse order, it decreases that, right? So what it means is that sometimes there are occasions where there was a verse that was kalamullah, it was recited as part of the Quran, and then Allah, for whichever reason, Allah instructed the Prophet ﷺ, don't include this in the recitation of the Quran. Which means it's still originally kalamullah, but it's not part of the Quran, because the Quran is a specific set of kalamullah. Okay. So one of those verses which is famous in the writing. So the question is, where do we get it from? We get it from the science of hadith. Because remember, hadith will carry the narrations of the Sahaba, what they used to say. So the famous one is going to be is that كان فيما أنزل, from that which used to come down, was a shaykh. Shaykh means an elderly person, male, or shaykha, and the elderly female. Elderly here means married actually, or it means in the Shafi mother previously married. I will understand it, but anyway, it means not a young person who's made a mistake. For example, if the two of them commit zina, فَرُجِمُوهُمَا, then stone the two of them. You with me? So no room is so in other words, because Allah still keeps the ayah of Surah Nur about the jild, about the lashing. That is still part of azaniya or zaniya too. That's still their part of it. But this was the Sahaba would say, we used to read this as part of the Quran until it was abrogated. Well, what is abrogated? Its reading was abrogated, not its application. You with me? Its reading as part of the Quran was abrogated, not its application. So some ulama would say that this verse, illa ma sha Allah, refers to those instances where it's in a sense that has not been forgotten completely, but has been removed from the recitation of the Quran. Now, I haven't read too much into the reasons why, but yes, I haven't read too much into it now. Okay, so I think that I'm not going to go more into discussion. Just to mention that illa ma sha Allah can refer to momentarily forgetfulness, as the Prophet did in Salah sometimes, or it can mean to a permanent removal. Not that the verse was forgotten like out of his mind, but it was removed from from the recitation of the Quran. So it's a metaphorical nisyan, a metaphorical forgetfulness. Now, innahu. Any other questions on that? What's this? Probably not, but you want to give me homework? No.
You think that is a indication of a verse that's not in the Quran? Almost like the speaking to do from like our parents.
Yeah, there's also like there's a whole world of like shadh qira'at also, which is analogous, which is similar to this. Meaning what they are qira'at that are mutawatira. Mutawatira means that there's a large group talking to a large group to a large group, and there are also qira'at which are not mutawatira, which has not been preserved by that large group, but we still have individual transmissions of them. And in them, there are many variances in the wording of the Quran, but that's not considered to be part of the Quran formal as preserved. As you see what happens is that there is like a simple discussion that we have for the public, and then there's for the Jummah we have a simple discussion. We don't speak about all the stuff in Jummah talks. And then as you become a student of Deen, you realize that there's more complexity to it. For example, the whole idea of ahruf, which is another discussion, was that the Quran was revealed in different forms. Sometimes you hear some of those forms in Qira'at. You'll hear them making an I instead of an A, or A instead of an A. You'll hear them saying a Ya instead of a Ta. You'll hear some idgham or no idgham. You hear some variances in it. So those variants, even like those variants, might be hard for some people to appreciate. Because why are you saying now wadduhi instead of wadduha? Didn't the Prophet come in one Quran? You with me? So what I'm saying is, as you get more into the discussion, there's a bit more complexity in it. So, but that complexity is best dealt with in the normal Quran formally. We study it as a formal science, because you must know what the definition of Quran is and all of those things, inshallah.
There's not nothing to why not to recite like that in a Jumu'ah, that where you have your awam and kids there that is just starting to learn out, and now they hear something different. There's so many questions afterwards that discussions that you generally can't have with even teenagers that would ask you now, what's up, what the society, or what type of recitation is that?
No, so I think that there's like two different societies for me. There's a society that's like a very close society, and then you give them what you need. Like the previous society, like your generation probably didn't grow up with Qira'at. I don't know, the older brothers say like Qira'at wasn't like a thing in your generation. I think I'm not talking about like the tune, I'm talking about different wordings. It wasn't like it's only very recent. So what I'm saying is that in a previous society that's very closed, that's very homogeneous, we tend to keep things simple. But now we live in a global society, so even if the imam doesn't recite that qira'ah, the child's going to hear it somewhere else. So it's best that those things are accompanied with explanation. So I don't think it's like, for me, it's like a neutral thing. You can do it, not do it. It's all like, it's all, according to the fiqh, it's all fine, because all, you know, it's all above board in terms of the fiqh. It's Quran, it's all of those things. But I do think it must be accompanied with the explanation, because when you have the explanation, then when the child hears somewhere else, oh, I know about this already. But then the child doesn't hear somewhere else, and they're going to say, but what's happening here? You with me? So for me, if it's part of an education journey, it's good, but it must be explained. No. But I think by now, I think the Cape Townians, alhamdulillah, are quite used to it. Like I think Cape Townians know about qira'at. Like, you know, if you hear wadduhi, you're like, you know, you're not like shocked by it. You're like, oh no, that's a scholar of Quran, he knows qira'at. So the Cape Town society is actually fairly advanced in terms of like, I would consider us to be the leading society in the Western world when it comes to qira'at. In the Western world, I think the leading society in the world. I mean, it's by now. I mean, the first woman to have Asha qira'at is in Weinberg, my neighbor, Malima Aisha. She's the first woman in South Africa to have Ashra qira'at. And I don't think up north it's known. And the rest of the world, they can't even find Hufad. You go to America, UK, you know what I mean? They're like trying to find Hufad, like all adverts here, like Cape Town has now progressed now beyond Hifz to actual qira'at and ijazat, and you don't get this in other Western countries. When Western, I mean like in the way, Arab world, yes, but in the Western world, you don't get such, you know, like every second person, what you have, Hafs, I have Ibn Kathir, I have, you know, I'm doing Shu'bah, like, it's like normal, yeah, it's like nothing like surprising. You're like, okay, you're doing okay, but there it's a big thing. Yeah, so I think that our society, because of this development, and I think the main, for me, the main person is actually Mawlana Salim Kaibi, Hafidullah. Salim Kaibi is really like, he's like the fountainhead of this production of qaris and qariyas in Cape Town. Yes, mashallah, he's doing amazing work as well, mashallah. Alhamdulillah. Okay. نعم إنه ليش finish ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى. Verily he Allah, he knows al-jahr. What's jahr? Jahr is something which is something done in the public, something done in the open, something done in manifest. وما يخفى, and he knows that which is hidden or that which is concealed. This also could be this discussion of how is it linked to illa ma sha Allah. There are certain things which Allah Ta'ala made manifest, which is like our mushaf now and our qira'at now. That's the jahr. And there are certain things like people ask like, why did Allah do this? Why was this removed? What was removed? What are the reasons for it? You know what I mean? This is the yakhfa. This is also part of the hidden meanings and the hidden understandings by Allah Ta'ala. So in other words, you always have this tension in the Quran. The tension in the Quran, not tension, is that when you read a verse, a part of verse, inna ya'lamu jahra wa ma yakhfa. Is Allah speaking in general? Allah knows everything manifest and everything hidden, or is Allah intending that by that only referring to qira'at? You ask me. If you look at like only with the lens of the tick of the theme, you say, oh, Allah is speaking here about qira'at, about that which is jahr, which is read aloud, that which is known and clear, and that which has been made to be forgotten and now has become hidden. You with me? So that's if you read it in the theme. If you take it out of the theme and you just look at the meaning of the words, it can mean Allah knows everything which is manifest, and Allah knows everything which is hidden. And for me, you should read the Quran in both ways. You read the Quran in its context, and you should also read the general applicability of the actual of the wording. How far is it nikah? Is it looking like a starting soon? Let me go check out. Give me a minute, inshallah. You know, no, I just want to make sure everything's fine. You know what happens? The nikah is like a very sensitive thing at the masjid, so I must make sure everything goes well, because we must facilitate the nikah. Just give me a minute, inshallah. I'll be with you in 1 minute. I just want to check everything. I'm back now, inshallah. Okay, bismillah, inshallah. So what's going to happen is that the sound system has changed in the masjid now. So when they have a nikah, then it will come on the speaker here, and you'll all be invited to it, inshallah. So your nasiha will be whatever the imam gives. It will be a nasiha. But basically, when the nikah starts, you can have a break, inshallah, for about 15 minutes. And when you return, we're going to have to wait until the nikah is done. So what I'm going to ask, inshallah, is that when you return, is that for you to start working in your groups on the translation of the next chapter of Surah Yusuf. But I think they are going to start now. So I think we're actually going to have a break. Was it crazy? Yes. So hopefully it won't be too long. Nikah, inshallah. But they are going to start now. So we're going to have to end the lesson now, inshallah ta'ala. And then we'll carry on next week, inshallah. But you have a break now. What's it now? 25 past. You can have a break for about, say, 25 minutes or so. And then come back and listen to it's not your refreshments here, it's nikah refreshments, no? Can Allah it's the nikah refreshments. So if they say bismillah, don't like if they say bismillah, you're not part of the nikah again. Your gate crashes. So you want to bring the food? So you can have a break, inshallah ta'ala, but either have a break here or outside, but we'll come back in about 25 minutes time, but then work on your Qissa to Yusuf until Mal Zakaria can start in the Kahtan, inshallah. Barakallah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anna, inshallah, you'll have to just wait. We have a nikah at the masjid here. So as soon as nikah is done, and then Mawla Zakaria will teach, inshallah. For those of you who want to use your time wisely, you can take a break and then you can just do some revision of your mazid fee, and you can carry on with your qissa to Yusuf, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Where's Anna? We'll see, inshallah.